and welcome to the first CC Live of 2021, hosted in collaboration with the Island Quarter. Today we'll be talking about the 15-minute city and discussing whether Nottingham can become the first true example of that concept. We'll be joined by Professor Carlos Moreno, the man who created the concept, who'll be talking us through the theory behind it and how it can be executed here in Nottingham. We'll also be on site with Tom as well, where you'll hear from leading academics and business leaders about some of the exciting plans for the city in the years to come.
That's right, Danielle, and as well as our extended interview with Professor Moreno, you'll be able to put your questions to the man himself as he joins us for our live Q&A later in the show. If you have a question for Professor Moreno or for Christopher Ware from the Island Quarter's developer Conygar, simply type it into the Q&A box below and we'll be answering those in a little while. But for now, let's take you to the first part of that interview with Professor Moreno, where he takes us through the building blocks of a 15-minute city.
First things first, massive thank you, Professor Moreno, for joining us today for talking about everything 15-minute city, which of course is your concept. So this concept of the 15-minute city has been discussed under different guises for many years now, but what would you say has caused it to become increasingly relevant at the moment?
Thank you for the kind invitation. In fact, the 15-minute concept today has become a very worldwide popular concept. Why? In reality, the 15-minute concept is not a new concept. The 15-minute city, in this moment, is a new way for reducing our CO2 emissions with a new urban lifestyle for exploring this proximity. What is the new situation for spreading in all continents this concept? In reality, the COVID-19, because with the pandemic crisis, we have today a new, very dramatic situation in all cities, in all territories, in all continents. We have been living under pressure with the COVID-19 for reducing our social contacts. We need to propose a new urban lifestyle in order to continue to live in spite of these dramatic situations. The convergence between climate change and COVID-19 has been opening this new possibility for proposing the concrete measures with this idea.
So for people watching who are maybe familiar with the 15-minute city concept but aren't sure of the principles of it, what are the key guiding principles that make up the 15-minute city?
The 15-minute city is a new path for living differently in our cities. We have 4 pillars. The first one, ecology, for living in a low carbon city. For that, we propose to reduce the CO2 emissions with the possibility to commute by walk or by bike, by foot or by bike, within a short perimeter. The second point is to explore the proximity for optimizing the material or immaterial resources. We need to optimize 6 urban social functions in this proximity: to live, to work, to supply, to care, to educate, to enjoy. If we have the possibility to provide them within a reduced perimeter by foot or by bike in 15 minutes, we have the possibility for reducing our time for commuting and to increase the quality of life. The third point solidarity. We need to propose the social link, intergenerational link, gender equity, for escaping to stress, to hectic life, and to anonymous life. And the fourth point, this is the citizen empowerment. We want to propose for in the districts to be committed for improving the quality of life with several local projects. If I wanted to put it in a nutshell, the 50-minute city is a big bang of the proximity based on a new urban policy for a polycentric city with the urban common good for avoiding degentrification. We want to, with the 50-minute city, to propose a city for all.
Paris, in particular, has taken the lead in bringing this concept and trying to make it a reality. How successful has that been?
Yeah, in the city of Paris, we have a mayor, Miss Anne Hidalgo, who has embraced this concept for this new mandature. Miss Anne Hidalgo today has been defining an ambitious roadmap for the next 6 years. In fact, the mayor of Paris, Ms. Anne Hidalgo, proposed 3 particular ways. The first one, to change the rhythm of the city, the chrono-urbanismo. Today, this is easier because with the COVID-19, we have the possibility to work close at home. The second point is the chronotopia, to develop the multi-purpose functions for infrastructures, for building. The more intensive and better use of the infrastructures. And the third point is to develop the topophilia. The topophilia, this is the new urbanities for loving our locations. And for that, the mayor of Paris has proposed new tools. The participatory budget, 800 million euros. The opening the schools during the weekend for developing new activities, to increase the local shops in the whole city for renting square meters without a speculative market, and to propose the social housing in different points of the city for providing this possibility for living, not only in ghettos of poor, of wealthy people, but to propose this polycentric way.
Some fascinating insight there into the 15-minute city from the man who created the concept. You can hear the second half of that interview later on in the show, and a full version will be available on the Island Quarter's YouTube channel later. We're now joined down on the Island Quarter by Dr. Lucelia Rodrigues, who is Professor of Sustainable and Resilient Cities at the University of Nottingham. Dr. Rodrigues, thank you very much for joining us. So one of the things that Professor Moreno talked about was kind of sustainability and ecology. How critical is things like sustainability and ecology for new developments such as the Island Quarter?
Sustainability has many facets, and all of those are crucial in a development this size and importance, and especially crucially for Nottingham. First and foremost, the issue of carbon reduction is essential. We need to address all the targets that the city has set itself, which are highly ambitious, but manageable and doable, and we need to do that now. To put that into context, if we were to improve all of the homes within the city, just existing ones, not counting any new developments that are going on now, and improving them just to the minimum improvement we have to get to, not a zero carbon level, but a level C, an EPC, we will still be left to 300,000 tons of carbon per year just from the housing. And that means more than 1,000 of these sites equivalent of trees every year that we need to plant to deal with the carbon emissions. So whatever we develop now needs to address carbon emissions from the start of the design and needs to be aiming at delivering buildings and spaces and places that are zero carbon.
And especially given what we've seen over the last year or so, how important is adaptability of design as well?
I think for years many businesses have been exploring the idea of working from home or giving that flexibility, but suddenly we're forced to adapt to that and change. And I think that was a positive move because we know the boundaries are no longer there. We know we can work across the globe from our own living room or our own home office if you have that. That also means we have to be really adaptable and ready for those changes about to come. And it may be a pandemic again or maybe different things to come. We know that climate change significantly and giving more extreme events, extreme heat, so it might be overheating, or extreme cold, or extreme rain, or flooding. There's lots of things that might be happening in the near future that have started now that we need to adapt now to. And that means our developments such as this are going to be resilient to a future that is constantly changing and is going to make our life and our development of our buildings life future-proof.
And one of the Island Quarter's kind of mantras is creating a new community for Nottingham. What are the key challenges that they might come up against in terms of building communities?
I think the Island Quarter has quite a challenge there, but it's not huge because of its location. It's so well connected to the city and so well connected to the train station that I think it would be just a matter of a good investment and good design to make this work quite well from that perspective. However, it does come with its challenge, and I think any development has to have this aspect of being citizen-centric, which the 15 minutes concept brings. So it's all about the people being able to access your site, being able to go through your site, being able to enjoy your site, their lifestyle not affecting the environment, but just naturally not forcing many changes onto them for it to become a success. A development of this size needs, in my view, to address three things. It needs to be zero carbon, it needs to be citizen-centric, and it needs to be a solution for the city. And that's what the Island Quarter has trained to be, deliver all those three pillars, which deliver, I guess, sustainability pillars.
Great stuff, Dr. Rodrigues. Thank you very much for chatting with us. As you can see and hear behind us, plenty's been going on site since we introduced the Island Quarter last July. So here's Danielle with a whistle-stop run-through of what's been going on.
After the planning submission for Canal Turn was announced during last summer's live launch, approval for the opening phase was granted in September. October saw Conygar make a donation to Sneinton C of E Primary to help provide its pupils with the technology for lockdown learning as part of an ongoing partnership with the school. Work on Canal Turn itself started in November last year, which will create a 3-storey events and hospitality space as well as new public realm and green areas. In January, a planning application was submitted for the next phase of the site, comprising a 17-storey hotel, rented accommodation, flexible office space and a public forum. The hotel will be operated by IHG, which also announced in January that it will be bringing its Hotel Indigo and Staybridge Suites brands to the Island Quarter.
Thanks, Danielle. There's certainly been plenty happening on site over the last few months. Now, stay tuned as we've got the second half of that keynote interview with Professor Carlos Moreno coming up. But for now, we're joined by Toby Reid, CEO of BioCity, which is one of Nottingham's leading organisations and also overlooks the Island Quarter. Toby, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, BioCity is one of the places that obviously benefits from having the Island Quarter on its doorstep. How important could that be for BioCity as a business?
Really important, and we're super excited about the development. For a number of years now, we've sort of been sandwiched between the bus depot and you know, what was a wasteland is now a gravel car park. So to see things starting on site and see the exciting plans for all of this land just on our doorstep is really, really exciting.
So obviously plenty of work's been going on the Island Quarter over the last year or so. What do you say are the, sort of the key benefits for BioCity and also the startups, the innovative startups that are based here?
I think partly, and very simply, it would just be nice outdoor green space for people who work here to be able to go out and enjoy and walk in and spend time in as we move into warmer summer months. That's often a challenge here, so that's super important, and the green spaces that have been kind of allocated within the planning look super generous, and we're really excited about that bit.
And also having something like this on your doorstep is going to be really, I guess, useful for you guys in terms of attracting those innovative businesses that are based here. I
think so, yeah. I mean, I think we're, post-COVID, we're going to be in a new world of work. I don't think everybody's going to go to a place to work just because it's got a desk and broadband. I think people will travel further to places that add value to their business, and I think sector-focused clusters such as BioCity stand to gain from that. But I think people will travel further, but perhaps less regularly, and maybe even stay overnight. And so the importance then of what you can do outside of work on your doorstep is even greater. And so, yeah, it will be great for those that are travelling further. It will also be great for those companies that are looking to relocate here with the plethora of bars and restaurants and housing options on our doorstep.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for joining us, Toby. That's about it from here at BioCity. But now we've got the second part of that keynote interview with Professor Carlos Moreno, where he talks about how Nottingham can become the first true 15-minute city.
And so today, of course, we're posing the question whether Nottingham could be a 15-minute city in the future. So what would you recommend for the city to try and avoid any potential pitfalls that may be on the horizon potentially?
I have 3 advice. The first one, to consider the common good before all, in order to explore how could we use the resources in the proximity with this urban flagship, the common good. I consider that the common good will be the first point if we wanted to propose the 50-minute city as a new urban policy. The second point, to explore the resources in different districts, because in reality, we have in each one of our districts lot of resources, lot of material resources, lot of square meters, lot of buildings, lot of areas. But in general, these resources are unused. We need to optimize the resources. For that, we need to explore the different resources. And the last point, we need to propose the dynamic tools for the citizen participation. The first one is the participatory budget. With the participatory budget, we have the possibility to finance projects submitted by citizens in each one of neighborhood for increasing, for improving the quality of life for each one.
Absolutely. And so let's bring it into Nottingham now. We are obviously fighting for Nottingham to be a 15-minute city in the hopefully not too distant future. What would you say makes Nottingham an ideal candidate for this concept?
All cities today are candidates for developing the 15-minute city concept. Regardless of the size of each one of city and regardless of the former urban policy, this is possible today to implement the concept of 15-minute city. Why? Because in reality, we need to propose to create a new model for living differently. I think that the ideal candidate for developing the 15-minute city, we need to have local governance, very climate change sensitive. This is very, very important because the origin of the 15-minute city concept is before all to reduce the CO2 emissions. The first point for the candidate to implement the 15-minute city is to be totally convinced that we need to change our urban lifestyle for reducing our CO2 emissions. The second point for the ideal candidate to be convinced that the urban common good, this is very important for the local governance. Without the common good, the consequence is to develop the high quality of life only for rich people, because if without the urban common good, it's not possible to avoid the gentrifications. The relevant danger is to build again a segregative city based on income or the higher revenues. The urban common good is very important. And the third point is to involve the economical actors, the social actors, and citizens. For that, we need to propose a new urban policy and to include people for sharing this roadmap, because we need to create a solid movement in order to develop this collective action. The 15-minute city is a collective action for implementing it.
And today, of course, we are talking about the Island Quarter as potentially being key in Nottingham's plans to become a 15-minute city. What are your thoughts on the Island Quarter plans so far?
We think that the potentially use of the 15-minute city in Nottingham, in my opinion, is linked in this way for creating a new model of the urban life. My experience in different cities for exploring the 15-minute city, in reality, is a permanent exchange between the local governance, the researchers, scientists, economic private sector. And if we wanted to go far, we need to start quickly. The danger is to expect to finish an ambitious plan before starting. One of the important sectors for starting, this is the real estate, because in several cities we needed to change the point of view of the companies involved in real estate. We need to stop the vertical real estate. We need to propose a new kind of real estate based not only in the vertical functions for corporate building, for social housing. We needed to mix, we needed to develop the mixing areas. In the same area, we need to find social housing, jobs, commercial activities, medical services, cultural activities, etc.
Now, this concept, of course, you have recently written an ebook on called The Urban Life and Proximity at the Time of COVID-19. So if anyone is interested in wanting to read a little bit more, where can they access your book?
Yeah, of course. In these complicated times, during the lockdown in France, I wrote an ebook with this convergence. They live today in cities at the times of climate change and COVID-19. My ebook is available in all digital platforms for downloading.
Thank you so much for your time today, Professor Moreno. It was lovely to meet you, and you will be joining us for the Q&A shortly, so I'm sure a lot of people will have plenty of questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind invitation. Have a good day.
Excellent stuff from Professor Moreno there, and he'll be joining us for our live Q&A shortly. So make sure you're submitting your questions in the box below, and we'll do our best to get through them all. So joining us now down on the Island Quarter is Lee Walker, Director of the Nottingham Project, which has a key role in shaping the city's cultural offering. Lee, thank you very much for joining us. So One of the Nottingham Project's kind of key mantras is that we are the rebel city. How does this kind of radical urban planning, the kind of things like the 15-minute city, how does that fit in with that?
I think it's a really interesting way of fitting into all of that. And, you know, over the last year we've spoken to, run consultations with the best part of 3,000 people and spoken to all the organisations in and around the city and the business community, and it's clear that something's got to change. And the 15-minute city idea and several other ideas that feed into modern urban theory on planning and development really all focus on putting people back at the heart of that. And obviously from our perspective, the cultural and creative aspect of that is really important in putting people back at the heart of it. But it's a really interesting model of playing with the idea that actually the fundamental priority for a place is people, whether that's giving people an experience or giving them amenities, as the 15-minute city model talks about, but rethinking our planning so that anything that's developed is built in a way that puts people at the heart of it.
And how important is something like the Island Quarter and projects like this for Nottingham as kind of like a hub almost?
But it's completely game-changing. I mean, with the Island Quarter sitting next to the potential Broadmarsh redevelopment site, across those two sites you've got a space almost unique across Europe in terms of scale and potential. And by those two schemes coming forward, and obviously the Island Quarter coming forward, you see the potential to transform both the size and scale of the city. And by getting the mix of uses in those places right, you could have something truly stunning. And Nottingham could be the next city to change, and change in a way that makes it the sort of the blueprint for all cities across the country as we move forward.
And you mentioned the Broadmarsh just down the road, all of this put together, it's a very exciting time for Nottingham, isn't it?
It really is an exciting time for Nottingham, but with that excitement comes the risk that if we don't get it right, you know, it's a real challenge. But the potential that comes with both of these schemes coming forward there's no better time to be in Nottingham, I don't think, and be at the forefront of shaping our city as it moves forward and transforms into something that's fit for people and for the next 100 years.
Lee, thank you very much for your time. That's all we've got time for on site at the moment, but it's time to head over to Danielle now for the live Q&A.
Huge thank you to everyone who has spoken to us today for today's webinar. And of course, it is now a massive pleasure to welcome our two panellists for this afternoon. We have Christopher Ware, Property Director at Conygar, and of course you've heard from him twice already today. We have Professor Carlos Moreno, the creator of the 15-minute city concept. Thank you both of you for joining us this afternoon. So we're going to get stuck into the Q&A with both of you very shortly. I've seen that we've had lots of questions coming in for the both of you already, which is absolutely fantastic. So without further ado, I think we'll get stuck in. But if you do have questions, please do make sure you're popping them into the Q&A box below, and we'll endeavour to answer as many of them as we can over the next 30 minutes. So Chris, I'm going to come to you first with this question. The 15-minute city is a fairly new concept, but the kind of life cycle living it talks about is something that's always been in the plan for the Island Quarter, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. I mean, I think from our point of view, we've always viewed this site as a mixed-use site. I think what we, and indeed other sort of sites, want to really avoid is to have that situation where you have, say, an office district that at 6 p.m. on a Friday is dark, cold, dangerous, and you don't really want to walk through it. I think what we really want to encourage is that mixed use, sort of living, working, playing in the same environment, which I think sort of ties in very nicely with the 15-minute city. And I think sort of on top of that, what we are looking to do is to really look to target people across, I suppose, their life cycle. So i.e., can we have student accommodation? Can we have people who maybe just have their first job after school, college, university? Do we then have young professionals? How can we have slightly larger space for the younger family? And then how can we look at sort of mixed later living as well? So that we really are looking across the sort of the life cycle there.
Absolutely fantastic to hear. And also, before we get stuck into any more questions, just a reminder to everyone watching today that a full-length version of the interview with Professor Moreno will be available on the Island Quarter's YouTube channel next week, as well as a recording of today's event. So if maybe you've got colleagues or friends who wanted to tune in but couldn't, that is how they'll be able to catch up with today. Now, Professor Moreno, let's come to you. This question is from David Leonard. Which cities from around the world should Nottingham be looking to learn from and benchmark against the future?
Yeah, this is a very good question. Today, with the 15-minute city concept, we have a very large movement of different cities, and in particular, with different size of cities. I think that, for example, for the metropolis as Paris, The first lesson is that it is possible to change our urban model if we have a long-term vision. This is not possible to change our city with a short-term vision if we wanted to embrace this concept. For the middle cities, I think that the first lesson is the possibility to reinvent the center of the city. In several cities, I think that this is the case in Nottingham, there are very different activities between the historical center and the other places in the city. In the middle towns, we have the possibility for developing with the 50-minute city with a quickly change for implementing the mix with the urban social functions. Yesterday, I worked with this middle town in Italy, and this is the city very present with students in the historical center, and the elderly people live in the outskirts. We needed to change this system for implementing essentially a new social activities. I think that in the Nottingham, for example, this is one of the points, because the difficulty in particular for the 50 minutes concept is to break the segmentation with the social activities, the students in the districts, the executive managers in other districts, elderly people in other districts. And for that, the role of the public space is essential. We needed to reconquer public space, to reconquer the mixity for housing. We need to reconquer the mixity in the cultural locations. And we need to develop the decentralized jobs for spreading this mix of the communities in the city. For the small towns, the first lesson is the possibility for create the short circuit, in particular with the agricultures for developing the new local employments.
Very good, thank you. Now, before we move on to the next question, which will come to you, Christopher, for, it is worth us saying that this 15-minute city idea is a concept, so it's not something that is part of, you know, any policy in Nottingham at the moment, but it's something that we feel fits quite nicely with the Island Quarter, which is why we're discussing it today. And this leads on quite nicely to this question, Christopher, because one of Professor Moreno's key points about the 15-minute city was just how imperative it is to work closely as a developer with the local authority. So how has that process been with Nottingham City Council?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, sorry.
Sorry for Christopher.
Please.
Yes, I mean, I agree. I think any sort of successful development of this scale, you have to work very closely with the local city council. And I think sort of here is no different. I mean, we've been working very closely with the city since we purchased the site a number of years ago. I think so the areas that maybe the public would see, obviously, are the planning side of things, the buildings which are sort of now slowly starting to come forward. But I think we've also been doing a lot of work in the background, particularly on the transport links. I think that's hugely important, and I think sort of links in very nicely with our topic today. But as you know, so the Island Quarter is on the big track, for example, cycle route, and the city has big plans to sort of connect that to further cycle tracks and other, I suppose, transport initiatives in the city. So we've been working very closely with them across the whole site and really seeing how we can link up this part of the city. And it's been going well, I think. Sorry, which was the question.
That's good. Was there anything you wanted to add, Professor Moreno, before we moved on?
Sorry.
No, good, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure. Fabulous. Now, that leads in quite nicely actually to an interview that we did with Paul Seddon, Head of Planning at Nottingham City Council, not around this time last year, it was around summertime, I believe it was. So we'll just have a bit of a look back on the conversation that we had with him.
From the outset, I would say that they were really receptive, really responsive to the requests that we made and how we saw what the Island Quarter could become and needed to become. I think most importantly, they were really willing to work with us and assemble a team that would take a master developer, kind of placemaker role on the site.
I'd say that probably echoes what you said, Christopher, which is always good to hear, isn't it? To hear the same from Paul Seddon. Now, Professor Moreno, this is a question from Alex Lipinski. You mentioned this previously about the town in Italy that you've spoken about a couple of times. How do we encourage mixed community living to the city centre when this is something seemingly at odds with the typical living trends in the UK? So your city centres for students, your suburbs are for your families more.
Yeah, this is a very good question, and we need to propose in the midterm, because the transformations into a 50-minute city from this situation of the segregative locations into a 50-minute city needs a concrete roadmap for transforming the public spaces, for offering different services for all sectors of the population. We need to transform the uses of a building. For example, if we have only the places for students, we need to mix the places for jobs, for working. If we don't have medical centers, we need to install medical centers. If we don't have enough private activities. And in our case, for example, in Paris, in Lisbon, in Barcelona, the idea is to select an area. And in this area, we want to explore the different services. And for each one of services that are unbalanced, we have decided to re-implement the services and to re-implement the uses of the building. Currently, in the city of Paris, for example, we have people that work in the west of Paris, and we have people that live in the east of Paris. We have decided to open a new context for transforming a building in order to work and living at the same time. I think that we needed to develop a transversal crisscross approach for balancing the social functions if we wanted to mix. And this is a reality today. If we wanted to develop this concept, the main guide in all cases is the polycentric way, and each one of different sectors we need to mix at least 4 of the 6 urban social functions. The social functions to live, to work, to supply, to care, to educate, to supply. If we have the possibility to mix at least 4 among the 6 urban social functions, we have the social mixity.
Fabulous, excellent. Thank you so much. Now, Christopher, this one is for you from Isaac Sabo. With the mentioning of adapting and change as well as participation, as mentioned by Professor Moreno, is this something that's being implemented into the Island Quarter over the years to come? And as the future phases form, will there be further considerations towards engaging the local and surrounding community?
Yeah, good question. And I suppose the short answer is yes. And the longer answer is also yes. I mean, I think we have had public sort of consultations with a variety of groups around the city so far, which is how we came to the outline planning consent. Yeah, there will absolutely be more as we go through the site. We currently have a sort of team working, for example, on the sort of the landscape and the placemaking side of things. I'm sure that again that will be sort of open at some point to some sort of public view, public consultation, and indeed for some of the larger phases as well as we go through. Absolutely.
Thank you. Now, Professor Moreno, this is a question that's come in from Caroline Stevens. She's asking if the new citizen-centric model requires new forms of funding. Of course it does, but what ideas for funding routes have worked in other cities maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a real, in fact, the answer is very, very clear. Today, we have in each one of our cities, the very important investments, in particular, in order to continue to finance infrastructures. Our proposal about this question could be funding, we propose to reorient the investments. In reality, the concept of the 50-minute city is based on the reuse of the infrastructure that exists today. In reality, we needed to invest in the marginal cost for readapting infrastructures. We have the possibility to reduce the investment because we wanted to use more and better infrastructure that exists. The concrete examples, the schools. In Paris, we have decided to open the schools during the weekend for developing other activities. The cost, this is very marginal. Second concrete example, we have the cafe, restaurant before the COVID-19. We have the possibility to use the coffee, the bar, the restaurant for example, deliver lessons for people in the foreign languages. We have the very important infrastructures for sports. There are empty 70% of the time. We have the possibility to open these infrastructures for developing new activities. In reality, the golden rules is to use more and better the infrastructure that exists today, and the cost in reality is only the marginal cost, and we no longer need big investments and infrastructures. The multi-purpose functions. This is the golden rule.
Absolutely. Now, I thought it had been a while actually since we'd mentioned COVID-19, and you just mentioned it there, Professor Moreno. So, Christopher, as we've just realised, not a webinar, webisode event goes by without the mention of COVID at the moment. So, how have the plans for the Island Quarter changed over the past year with the impacts of the pandemic in mind?
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose from our point of view, in many ways, I suppose it's probably more evolution rather than revolution. I think in many ways we've been lucky that we were still at a design stage when sort of COVID-19 arrived into our lives. So we haven't had to sort of undo anything particular. I think really what it's done is probably just reinforced some of the thoughts that we previously had about that mixed use of work-live structures. I mean, for example, the sort of the 1B application that we're calling, which is went in at the start of the year, which includes sort of a hotel, co-working space, and 247 apartments. And I mean, I think our view there was always that mixed use buildings are the future, and I think sort of COVID has just reinforced that fact. And I suppose in many ways, COVID has just accelerated current trends and previous trends rather.
Which does tie in nicely, I suppose, to that 15-minute city concept about the combining the living, working, all of the different elements that Professor Moreno's spoken about. Now, Professor Moreno, another one for you, and I do apologise if I say anyone's names wrong today, but this one is from Fabio Bellucci, asking if you could explain in more detail how we can promote gentrification without displacement.
Yeah, the gentrification, I consider that this is the most relevant danger if we will fail the concept of 50-minute city. In order to avoid the gentrification, the golden rule is the urban common good. For that, we need to propose the new financial and administrative tools. The city of Paris, for example, has implemented the company subsidiary 100% in order to be the guarantee for avoiding desertification. Social housing with the price below the speculative real estate market. Local shops for buying by the city of Paris the square meters and to offer for installing local shops with a correct price for renting. The participatory budget, 800 million euros. This is the amount of the participatory budget in the city of Paris in order to promote the projects in the local neighborhood by the citizens. And each one of these projects, their goal is to avoid the gentrification, because we have the possibility to propose the projects and to submit to win by the voting and to deploy. And in general, the most important point is to have by the local governance the regulation. The regulation, the public regulation, it is very important if we wanted to avoid gentrification. The price of the square meters for renting in the city of Paris is totally regulated. It's not possible to request another price for a location different of the maximum of the city. And it is not so totally very easy for explain in the other countries, but this, in our French Republic, the common good, the social housing, the regulation of prices, the regulation of data, the participatory budget, the social security are the values of our republic, very, very important. It is not possible to give to the market the possibility for regulating, because the market is not a regulatory system. The only possibility for having a regulation is the local governance. This is the common good by the public service.
Absolutely, thank you. Now we've still got about 10 minutes or so left with both Christopher and Professor Moreno, so got a few more questions coming for you as of yet. So this next one is for you, Christopher, from Robert Dixon. What are the key things that attracted Conygar to Nottingham when you first took on the Island Quarter site?
Okay, yeah, I think from our point of view, I suppose to think about the island sort of quarter as a whole, I mean, there are very few sites like it in a top 10 UK city. I cleared 35 plus acre sites, just a couple of minute walk from the train station. So from that point of view, it was very interesting before we even went any further. I think secondly, Nottingham is a really quite interesting city. I think, as I'm sure a lot of people on the call know, it's one of the youngest UK cities. It has a huge, now a lot of that is students, but it does have a huge number of young people in it. And in fact, more proportionally than Berlin, Amsterdam, Barcelona, sort of any number of quite sort of cool European cities. At the same time, it is actually a bit of a fintech hub. It has a hugely, I suppose, entrepreneurial population. It has more patents per capita than the likes of Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, much sort of larger cities. So I think that Nottingham has a lot going for it, and it's a really quite an exciting place. I think what it's probably lacked is maybe a voice to sort of shout about it, some of those successes. And I mean, I hope that we, as part of the Island Quarter and other projects in the city, can really help sort of harness that energy which is naturally there. Because I think the demand is there for everything, for sort of residential accommodation, for office space. The demand is there. I think what's been lacking maybe is the supply. And I hope sort of we're part of that solution.
Hope so, definitely. Now, Christopher has set up very nicely a kind of overview of Nottingham there for this next question for you, Professor Moreno. Final one for you today. Nottingham has as Chris said, lots of things going for it. It has a proud heritage as well of being forward-thinking and rebellious. Does that make it an ideal candidate to be a 15-minute city, do you think?
Yes, the city of Nottingham today wish to become a 15-minute city, and I'm very happy with this idea. And I consider that there doesn't exist an ideal candidate. The only point is the will for transforming the urban life model. For that, a city as Nottingham has the possibility to develop this polycentric model. I understand that Island Quarter is one of this sector. And we need to identify in each one of the sector, how could we propose the totality of services of the urban social functions in this happy proximity. The key word is to propose, and in each one of the sectors for the citizen dwellers, the happy proximity, for satisfying the quality of life, for having a correct housing to work close to home, to have a correct access to culture, to have a correct access to shops, to develop the multi-purpose functions. And in reality, I think that a city as Nottingham has the possibility for becoming a 15-minute city if we consider a roadmap, and each 3 months you have the possibility to check the advancement for in this way. But this is not only a question of the local governance. We needed to have a committee or local committee with the local governance, the economic sector, the citizens, and the association for checking for each one of sectors what are the roadmap for adapting, for implanting the urban social functions in these 15 minutes. And the last point, the public spaces for developing the gender equity, for developing the new places for living. The public spaces without cars, the public spaces for biking, the public spaces for pedestrian people, the public spaces for kids, for simply play, and to take care of the elderly people in this situation. The public spaces, I consider this is the key element for the transformation, because the public spaces are totally visible every day and daily situations of its transformations.
Well, it was good to hear a yes within that answer, definitely. Thank you so much, Professor Moreno. We've got time for just one more question for you, Christopher, to end with. How are things progressing with the Island Quarter? We've seen earlier that Phase 1A is well underway and that 1B is in for planning. What's next for this city within a city?
Yes, of course. I mean, I suppose if this is the last question, I'd just like to say thank you to Professor for joining us. I think it's been really interesting to hear his views on this topic. But I mean, in terms of the Island Quarter itself, as you say, we are now on site, which is great. And you would have seen, or the viewers would have seen sort of the background in some of those earlier videos. So that's good. So that project should be completed in about 12 months' time. And I think that's going to really open up the canal. I mean, the canal has been such an underused asset in the city for so many years. And in many ways, the city's turned its back on it. And I think this sort of initial phase we're going to bring forward is really going to change that. It's going to bring a really exciting public realm to the Island Quarter. And hopefully it's going to start bringing sort of the people of Nottingham back to the site. At the same time, as you said, we have submitted planning application for the building adjacent to that, which is that sort of mixed-use building we discussed earlier. I mean, hopefully that'll be going to the planning committee in the coming months. We'll be submitting an application for some student accommodation in the coming months as well. And then we're working quite hard at the moment in the background on a number of other areas of the site, including those old heritage warehouse buildings, which I'm sure a lot of the viewers will be interested to hear our proposals when they come forward.
Yes, definitely. Those heritage buildings are something that I've always been fascinated. I'm a Nottingham girl, so I've seen them growing up all my life. So it's exciting times on the Island Quarter. Thank you. Thank you both, Christopher and Professor Moreno, for joining us today. It's been fantastic to hear both of your thoughts. And thank you to everyone for submitting so many questions. We didn't manage to get round to all of them. So what we're going to do is we will endeavour to get answers out on social media in the coming weeks. So make sure, if you're not already, that you're following at Island Quarter on Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. And Professor Moreno, we mentioned your book earlier on today, didn't we? So the urban life and proximity at the time of COVID-19, will also pop a link to Carlos' book on there as well for anyone who might be interested. Thank you so much, both of you. Have you had a nice time, Professor Moreno? It's been great to have you.
Have a nice time. Thank you for the kind invitation. Bye-bye.
No worries. Thank you so much, and thank you, Christopher, as well. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon. Thank you. And we will speak to you all very soon. Thank you ever so much.